asking if we can, yeah, we'll record the meeting from our side and we'll put it up on our YouTube, and you can definitely then view the recording. Okay, so as people join in, let me just start by introducing the panel and introducing the topic. I'll start with hello, namaste, and salam to everybody who's joining us today from India, South Asia, and also I think a lot of people are joining us from North America. My name is Priyali Soor. I'm the founder of the Azadi Project. We are a non-for-profit organization that works with refugee, migrant, and marginalized women and youth. Our special two-part webinar series is to mark World Refugee Day, and it has been organized to draw attention to the ongoing conflicts globally and in the South and the Southeast Asian region. We also hope that through these discussions with the panelists and also with you all, our audience, we will be able to find a collaborative way forward that we will then compile into a report and share with relevant organizations and authorities. So today I'll be moderating the first panel of our two-part webinar series. It's called State Responses to Refugee Flows, South and Southeast Asia. Now, why we decided to focus on this region to begin with is first to bring attention to the increased violence in Myanmar, the deteriorating human rights and women's rights conditions in Afghanistan, and also how neighboring countries like India or Bangladesh, even Malaysia, Thailand in this region are responding to the people fleeing from here. Secondly, this region has dual significance. As I just mentioned, it has countries where refugees originate. It is also where countries where refugees seek shelter. But the crux of our discussion today is going to be the focus on state responses, policies, laws, or even the lack of it that impact refugee protection, their lives, livelihoods, and resettlement. I have an excellent and diverse panel joining me today. We have Rita Manchanda, who's joining us from New Delhi in India. Rita is a feminist scholar, researcher, and human rights activist. She has close to 3 decades of experience in conflict, security, and peace building in South Asia, with a focus on vulnerable groups like women, minorities, indigenous people, and forcibly displaced people. She also consults for international organizations such as the UN, the Commonwealth Technical Fund, and is currently at the South Asia Forum for Human Rights. Razia Sultana is joining us from Chittagong in Bangladesh. Razia is a Rohingya feminist activist, and she specializes in trauma, sexual assault, and works to prevent trafficking of Rohingya girls and women. She was awarded US Women of Courage and has also spoken at the UN Security Council about the displacement of the Rohingya people and other ethnic groups from Myanmar. Pavni Nagraj Bhatt is joining us from Bangkok in Thailand. Pavni is an investigations associate with Fortify Rights, and her work focuses on protection of refugees in South and Southeast Asia. Pavni has also worked with police reforms team of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. Jay Ramasubramaniam is joining us from Toronto in Canada. Jay is an assistant professor at York University. He's currently working on 2 book projects on refugee and migration issues in South Asia with Cambridge University Press and Lived Places Publishing. Prior to his academic career, he worked with UNHCR and the International Committee of the Red Cross. Okay, so I'm going to start with Razia. Razia, given the escalation of violence that we are seeing in Myanmar, especially, it's been over the last few months, it's been going on for the last few years, but the fact that you have been working with the refugees in Bangladesh, refugees coming in from Myanmar in Bangladesh, you also run a center in the camp. What is the situation in the camps with a larger influx of refugees coming in from Myanmar? And, are there enough facilities or, is there enough protection for them as they come in?
Thank you, Priyali. I am Razia Sultana from Bangladesh, and I am a founder of RW Welfare Society, and my origin is Rohingya. Nothing is secure in camp. After COVID, the situation worse, and now is more worse. After the coup also, devastate the people, and people become very aggressive. And I think you are aware, some militant group also created inside in the camp. Those are not representing Rohingya at all. They are just interested in trafficking, drug dealing, or robbing this. And they got the support from both sides. And even from the last 2 months, everyone know what happening inside in the Rakhine State with Tatmadaw and the AA. And the militant group last 2 weeks, till the last 2 weeks, they accuse and kidnap the youth, even the children, and the militant group selling our youth to AA and Tatmadaw only as a pay soldier. They are not a freedom fighter. First, some youth inside in the Rakhine State willingly they joined with AA. But slowly they realized AA never will stand with the Rohingya. So they are not only fighting with the Myanmar army, Tatmadaw, they also killing innocent people, especially the Rohingya. Even they created ceasefiring within in the Rohingya village purposely. They always choose the villages. Butidong, yes, northern Rakhine State and Butidong almost now destroyed. And every day we are hearing so information is said people are killing, innocent people are every day. And people, not very much, few people from Mangdo stuck in Bangladesh border. And Bangladesh government will not open the border at all, but people are starving. They cannot go shopping, I mean for the ration. So and even they cannot work freely. Even if you go outside or from your shelter, your life is just anyone can shoot you like a bird. So another issue, the forcefully they recruit our youth, both group. Our Rohingya is now middle of AA also forcing our Rohingya people. Tatmadaw also forcing our people. Last month, suspicious about some youth without any evidence. Just AA thought that these people, our youth, more than 30, that they are working for the Tatmadaw. And online, they make a line and then they just shoot them. Media is quiet because we have some source, we're getting the information because the online shut down, internet is shut down, even we cannot call them. But some people are using Bangladesh SIM, so some information is coming out. Some people also raising the issue. Everything is just destroying. The thing is not what we've seen from. Okay, some is maybe AA or Tatmadaw is fighting. Maybe accidentally Rohingya are suffering. No, purposely both group targeting the Rohingya. It's like a last step of banishing this community, but it is not fair. Tatmadaw already they are under ICJ and they are welcome. And now the AA also doing the war crime. They don't have any right to kill the innocent people who don't have any training, and they just force them to fight with them. So, and even yes. So and yes, okay, you can.
Sorry, so I think what you're trying to say is that this is like the most vulnerable and most persecuted population, and even when they're fleeing violence and persecution, and in fact fleeing a genocide, there is no safety on the other side because of violent extremist groups, even within the camp. So, so
the
what
genocide? Yes, I can say clearly. Genocide not start in 2017. It start from decade. And when you see the 2012, the genocide the exposed in 2012, but no one is accepting this one. Just that this is a ethnic cleansing or some accident. No, this is the genocide because the 2017 influx was exposed. So whatever they are forced to, this is genocide. But now what is going on is massacre, and it also affect inside our camp because the camp, yes, camp people cannot move, and the Russian, everyone know the aid is now limited. And these people, they don't have any opportunity for a job or any financial support. And even they are not allowed to move one camp to one other camp. And education, forget about the education. there is no education, basic education, youth roaming around. More than 3,000 self-running school 3 months ago just shut down for World Bank education program. For whom? For whom? Because in the camp, children are not getting education. But one thing I always appreciate to the Indian government, when our people are influx and the fleet in the India, they first secure the education system. Whatever is going on, they allow them to go to the school. They allow them to university. But here, 7 years now. 7 years is enough for a build, I can say, a life. And here, without education, for more, when we influx, there are 40,000 matriculation, I think A level student were. And now 7 years. So 7 years, if they got the chance, maybe in meantime they will be graduate. But now none of the didn't get the chance, just roaming around the camp and jump. And everyone know, if you don't have any work, when you are restricted, your mind will be aggressive. So
Always goes into the wrong.
Yes,
Yeah.
this
So
youth
I
are
think,
now.
I think Raja will come to India, and what India offers in terms of education, livelihood, just a bit in a bit, and I think I'll give Rita an opportunity to talk on that. But since you talk about the conditions in terms of like no safety, no security, lack of education, I think what ultimately happens is, and what we see, that a lot of these Rohingya refugees, in fact, are compelled to get onto boats and leave these camps, leave Cox's Bazar, and try and go to like countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, hoping that there's going to be a better system or better access to facilities and better access to social safety nets. But unfortunately, even in these countries, as soon as they enter the waters, there have been pushbacks. And I'm going to bring Pavni into this, because I think Pavni has been looking at this issue for a very long time in terms of pushbacks. Pavni, can you talk a little bit about, we hear about these boats coming every now and then. India has pushed back many boats. We also know Thailand and Malaysia. There is a non-refoulement policy, but even though that exists, even though these countries feel that they can push the boats back, we've seen so many boats drowning and people kind of sinking to their deaths with this.
Yes, Priyali, thank you. I think the pushback policy is being practiced in many countries in the region, and one of the main causes is also that a lot of the countries in the region haven't really signed the Refugee Convention and its protocol. And just by not signing that, they are comfortable enough to say that these laws are not binding on us and they don't apply to us. But I think what is important to understand is non-refoulement is a customary law policy, and no country can practice it irrespective of whether they have signed the Refugee Convention or not. Because when you push back someone who is at legitimate fear of being persecuted in that country or in that region, that also constitutes torture. So they are going to be tortured there. And if they have that fear, then you are not allowed to do that, whether you're party to the Refugee Convention or not. We do in many of these countries, you have practices and domestic policies that are supposed to be protecting the refugees, that are supposed to be giving the legal status to the refugees. But what happens is these policies are not protective enough. They don't actually include all of the people that are actually not able to return to their countries because they are being persecuted. For example, if I have to talk about Thailand, there is a policy called the National Screening Mechanism, which basically identifies who is a refugee, on what grounds they become a refugee, and where do they come from. But sadly, they also have exclusions about people coming from certain countries that do not become refugees just because they come from certain countries. Or if I move here as a migrant and then I become a refugee because something happens, say I'm from Myanmar and I can't go back to Myanmar because I will be persecuted there, I won't be accepted as a refugee in Thailand because they think I'm a migrant worker. So there are many of these exclusions, and just because one person holds a certain kind of status and then it changes, it doesn't mean they're not a refugee. Rita, do you want to say anything at this point?
Rita raised her
Yeah,
hands.
I just want to clarify. Look, the Rohingyas are in a very, very special legal position in the sense they are stateless. Myanmar says they are not our citizens. One of the reasons that the Indian government hasn't been able to continue its deportation drive has been because Myanmar has pushed them back, said, no, we're not going to accept them. So I think we need to be very careful about recognizing the particular situation and tragedy of the Rohingyas, that they are stateless. Other refugees, exactly as you said, they're persecuted, but they can return. There is the possibility of return. Here, there is no possibility. Sorry, thank you.
So Razia wants to come in to that point. You want to talk about this?
Just something about the stateless. Rita, Rohingya are not the stateless, and it is no, because the history say we have our own name. Because the name of the stateless in the 2012, they are not accepting the genocide case in ICC because of the stateless. But when we 2015 and 2016, 17, when we proved that we are not stateless, then we got ICJ, now the ICC. So it's proved. So I hate to say that no, we are not stateless. We have our own land, that is the Arakan. Sorry for interrupt you, Rita, because this is the truth. The issue is raised in before in even the 2012, but not now. No, not we are not accepting the stateless. This you can say. It's takma. You call it in your Hindi. No, this is not our identity. We are not a stateless. We have our own land. So Rohingya have a land. Thank you.
So Razia, I think you make that point very clear, and thank you for making that point very clearly. I think what Rita was trying to say is that why are the Rohingyas so marginalized, and why are they so discriminated? And maybe that's why they need a lot more attention. But again, so I want to come back to you, Razia, in a bit in terms of, because you spoke about ICJ, because you spoke about international attention. So I think I'm going to come back to you on that. But Jay Pavni raised an important point of, the exclusionary policy in terms of refugees. Like Thailand has this exclusionary policy that some people will be considered as refugees and some people will not be considered as refugees. Do you see, that those have been the conversations and and the protests pretty much in India as well when we talk about the Citizenship Amendment Act in a way, right? Do you want to comment on that in terms of, is that also an exclusionary refugee policy?
Oh, thank you. Certainly, I think the points that have been made by the speakers so far do very much go to the heart of these debates. One of the aspects that does come up quite often, especially in the subcontinent, is the ambiguous environment that's been created as a result of policy shifts or even legislative changes that have clearly sent a signal that we are shifting towards a more regressive environment for refugees. As far as India is concerned, which is a larger part of my work, historically, India has been pretty dynamic in its approach with respect to hosting refugees since the partition of India. Of course, that has changed over a period of time with not only ethno-nationalist interests and authoritarian regimes, but also with the changing policy on refugee hosting, both within India and also in the neighborhood. So, I mean, I do agree with Rita on the point that the Rohingya do need special attention, given the fact that the UN has repeatedly mentioned that they are the most persecuted minority in the world, and they have the added aspect of, constant pushbacks and, of course, being in a state of limbo. The Citizenship Amendment Act does create a very, very serious environment of unwelcoming environment for refugees. And it also adds to some of the debates, at least in the Indian judiciary as well, whereby things have been pretty progressive in the past, where constitutional protections were extended to non-citizens and refugees. But there has been a shift now, especially with the 2021 decision, in the Supreme Court, which rejected the Rohingya refugees' right to non-refoulement, whereby it was said that India is not a signatory to the 1951 convention and are thereby not obligated to follow any of the regulations of the Refugee Convention, which is actually a misstep. Much like what Pavni was saying, non-refoulement doesn't have to necessarily be, India is not obliged to be a party to the 1951 convention, but they're still very much supposed to abide by the principle of non-refoulement, given that it's a customary international law principle. So having said that, rights under Articles 14, equality before law, Articles 21, protection against deprivation of personal liberty in the Indian Constitution, might be available to non-citizens. That's been the case in the past, especially with the Indian judiciary, that has very clearly noted this in case of Chakma refugees and other groups of refugees who arrived in India. So I think one of the things that we need to look at is the multiplicity of these factors, especially given that there are political interests that are shifting, policy shifts, there are other forms of ethno-nationalist interests, and of course, the servility of legal institutions to the current government. So there are so many moving parts to this. Unless we harmonize all of them, we may not be able to discuss solutions to these issues. So I will leave it at that, but I'm really interested to hear the questions and other points as well.
So Jay, I think that's a natural segue to the point that Rita, a lot of the work that Rita has done on the issue of, conflict and securitization and the misuse of the word security or securitization. So Rita, I think what Jay kind of specified, that India and countries like India, for example, in this region, who are not signatories of the Refugee Convention, have been able to say that, listen, we've not signed up the Refugee Convention. We can continue to do the pushbacks, but also security has been raised as a main issue. Like, we don't want this group of people to come in because we don't want our demographics to change. Security is a major issue. It could be a national security thing. Could you talk a little bit about that, how security is weaponized?
Okay, thank you very much. I want to go back to what Rokhaya said, because Razia said, sorry, because in a sense, she described an extremely complex situation in the camps, a situation which frankly is a very volatile, pretty insecure situation. If I was a government, I too would be worried. The problem is here, exactly as Jay said, the CAA, that is the Citizenship Amendment Act, in the way that it has been framed and the way that certain communities are excluded, shows that our policy towards the Rohingyas is ideologically driven. It's not driven by, say, foreign policy considerations in terms of our economic relations with Myanmar. It's not driven really by security considerations, because over the last 5 years, they have been attempting to find evidence of on the security case as regards the Rohingyas. They have not been able to do so. Time and again, government politicians have got up in parliament to say there is no evidence. So they're still searching, but there is no evidence. So it is then ideologically driven. And it's this which is of great concern. Not that there are genuine security concerns. They can be dealt with, as in fact was done with the Sri Lankan refugees. There was an attempt made to separate, to vet, and to make sure that security was assured. So it's not that that concern is illegitimate. It is merely that it's being misused in the case of the Rohingyas, because it is an ideologically driven policy. And here, because since I am speaking about the Indian context, I want to refer to, as Jess said, our historical case, the historical tradition of India has been pretty positive. And if you come to, say, the Afghan refugees at the moment, there's not a huge caseload, but still, in terms of the Afghan refugee, India has responded. Of course, there's been a problem in terms of visa. It's peremptory, cancelled a lot of visas. But in terms of those who are already here, there are guidelines have been issued that there's going to be no pushback, no question of return as far as, and they have taken cognizance of UNHCR's directive that all Afghan women and girls will be seen as at risk, and therefore prima facie they should be recognized as refugees under the convention. So, there is a balancing that goes on. But yes, if you're a Rohingya, you're in trouble. Schools, Razia talked about schools, but today we're having a situation where Rohingya boys are being called infiltrators. Why are they being called infiltrators in a school? Because this is, in fact, the rhetoric that's all around. So, and it is ideologically driven. Security is important, but it cannot be misused to deny humanitarian considerations.
So I'm glad, Rita, that you brought in the point of other refugees as well. For example, Sri Lankan refugees and Afghan refugees. But this different treatment towards different refugee groups, whether we allow Afghan refugees to kind of enter or to access educational institutions, and we say there's going to be no pushback for them, whereas boats carrying another group of refugees of a different ethnicity are pushed back. Pavni, I'm going to come to you on this. What does this ultimately kind of lead to? Like, is there a desperate need in India and countries in this region for a legal framework, which can kind of talk about, or which kind of can have like a blanket policy, a policy which is kind of uniformly applied to all refugee groups, and people can resort to that in the time of need, at the time of need?
Yeah, I think that that would be very important, because going back to my previous point about excluding people based on, certain characteristics that don't really matter, but when you are a refugee, that creates distinction, and that is discrimination. And what we are seeing in India is that one particular group is being discriminated that way. They are being detained in detention centers despite the fact that they're refugees, and despite the fact that they can't go back to the countries that they're actually from, because the country refuses to recognize them as their citizens. And we are noticing that this is happening in terms of Rohingya in India. And this kind of discrimination or differential treatment between different classes of refugees, it's very visible. And because of the lack of laws, like I was saying before, it is lack of laws, or even the ways that the laws are being prepared right now. It's easy for governments to do this. And yeah, I think Jay has something to say.
Jay, you want to come in?
No, I mean, I wanted you to finish the point. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. One of the things, much like what Pavni was saying, is that India has adopted what scholars like Chimney would say strategic ambiguity when it comes to hosting refugees in India. So I think it is one of those positions to be in where India was trying to leave behind the legacies of the empire and probably focus on post-colonial nation building, which is a much larger debate. But when it came to the refugee protection arena, India was initially quite resistant to the refugee protection framework because it was not particularly all-encompassing. It really did not take into account refugees who were displaced as a result of the partition of India. So it was heavily Eurocentric. The focus was heavily on European refugees, and there was a preoccupation with European refugees. So India came away from the formalization process of the 1951 convention, saying that, well, we do not want to abide by the convention to the last detail, but we still are agreeable to the core precepts of international refugee law. That was the history. That's what Rita was also talking about. Historically, India has been pretty dynamic in its approach, pretty flexible in its approach. So what we see now, 75 years later, is much. It's a regressive and remarkable shift driven by ideological concerns. So the strategic ambiguity part is specifically something that India hasn't been able to clarify, which is why a lot of scholars have actually called for India to at least develop some kind of a framework that would create some kind of a standard for refugee protection. At the end of the day, Sri Lankan refugees were left up to the government of Tamil Nadu to take care of. Tibetan refugees all over the place. So we don't see a very consistent approach when it comes to refugee protection in India. And that is a constant concern, which is something hopefully we will see, perhaps allay if we were to come up with some kind of a framework.
Rita, you want to come in here?
Sorry, just a footnote. I think we need to recognize that there has been a shrinking of the hospitality basket for refugees all over the world. I mean, to single out India maybe a bit, I think, we are actually distorting the frame, because in a sense, this is Fortress Europe. What we're seeing all over the world is there is a turning of one's back against the humanitarian appeal of the refugee. And also, I just wanted to mention that it is discriminatory in terms of budgets. I mean, take UNHCR's budget. Why is it that the budget for Pakistan has been cut when they have just over the last, say, 2 years, received 800,000 new flow of Afghan refugees? Why should it be cut? Why should it be? Why should we be left feeling that the international protection regime is not free and fair? That there is issues of race that are also driving considerations. So it's not, I mean, there's never been an ideal system, but I don't think, we should single out. I mean, I frankly am extremely critical about my own government, but there is a wider reality that needs to be taken cognizance of.
No, absolutely. I think you make a great point, Rita. And so we're already at 7:03 by India time. So, we will have to open up this to question and answers, but I'm going to do one last round for everybody to kind of quickly mention in 30 seconds. Yeah, I'm going back to my TV days of saying 30 seconds. So mention in 30 seconds to, let's say, a minute as to what you think should be a change. Could be a policy change, anything that you believe needs to change to kind of bring more attention, really to kind of improve the lives of refugees in this region. Razi, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. I will start with the discriminatory, because Rita already mentioned the UN issue. Actually, the UN is a mechanism in using by the international community. So they have a two side. It's like sometimes they are a humanitarian actor, and sometimes they are just blind eye the justice. And in the Rohingya issue, whatever in Asia Pacific issue, I can say the third world, they are not considered this issue is very seriously, because you can say the Rohingya have the ICG just like a trophy. For me, it's only a trophy. Just we give you a trophy, just keep quiet. But how long? Because our people are dying, and even we are not getting the proper support. But in the meantime, you see the Israel, you see the Ukraine, the whole openly they are supporting them. We have also right to survive. We are also human beings. Why this discrimination? Because our skin, because our religion, or about the natural resources? And the blind eye or double standard, we cannot say UN is a humanitarian or they are our survivor. Yes, people keep hope, because no one is there. Even for the in Myanmar issue, they providing training. I'm not mentioning the country, because they're giving the all kind of support or training to killing the inside Myanmar citizen.
So
How
Razia,
can you say yes? Okay,
so
thank
Razia,
you.
so you're saying basically that UN bodies and international organizations, including Security Council, etc., are turning away from this issue. They're not looking,
Yes,
they're
yeah,
looking
this is
away,
the truth.
and they
This
need
is
to
the truth. They
because
have to be, yes. No, I don't think so, because there is a superpower, but they have to be more motivated, because there are also other countries. I think those who the country don't have the power, they have to come together. Just we cannot depend on the four superpower. So this is the issue. So I think I clear my mind, because this is the clear. Look at that equal. Look at even ICC. They are starting Rohingya issue for 2-3 years. It's still
Right.
nothing is. But within 1 week, they give sanction. I think the arrest warrant for Putin. Whatever Min Aung Hlaing in the Myanmar.
Yeah.
So this is the thing.
Yeah.
But only is a business issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Razia. Pavni, your last point as to where do you think there should be change to bring about any improvement in terms of protection, livelihood, lives for the Rohingya for the refugees in this region?
I'd like to go back to what Razia was saying in the beginning about how unsafe the environment is in the camps, and also just the lack of adequate food and adequate, just basic facilities that human beings need to survive. Refugees should have access to all of it. I think a year back it was that the funding for even food was reduced drastically. So when we were documenting what is happening in the camps, we were seeing that people were selling their own meal tickets to be able to buy food or fuel. Like, people have been giving up and they've been having maybe like one meal a day to be able to feed their families. So I think the recommendation is on two levels. One is for all of the international actors to recognize that there is so much of a need to do this. You can't starve people because you're tired of taking care of a group of refugees. They didn't become refugees by choice. And the other is also for host countries, right? There's a lot to say about the legal framework and how it doesn't exist or how it's not perfect, but also the practices that officials have in these countries. The rising criminal activities, whether it's in the camps or whether it's criminal activities by officials themselves. Police abuse is a very big issue in all of these countries, whether it's extortion, arbitrary arrests, beatings. There's a lot happening. So it's also incumbent on all of these governments to take action, investigate, and hold these officials responsible, because you can't keep treating refugees as ATMs and extort money from them either.
Absolutely. Okay, so Pavni makes a great point to increase the funding to make sure there's more funding for refugee groups. Rita, your point?
Yeah, just very quickly, two appeals. One is to India that they need to recognize the category of refugee. At the moment, everybody is seen as a foreigner, and if there is if your visa is expired, then your status is that of an illegal alien. There needs to be recognition of the specific legal category of refugee. And to UNHCR, time and again, I have heard from refugees say they are humiliated by the indignity of the way they are treated at an office that has been set up to provide them care and protection. Why are they always being told, wait, we will get in touch? That wait can go on for months and months and months, and all they do is just hang around. Why can they not be treated with some dignity?
I think you could make that great point about UNHCR. In fact, why should the UNHCR only see refugees in Delhi? Why not in other places, especially in border areas? And I'm speaking in terms of India at this point. But Jay, you want to come in with your recommendation or last
But
point?
they're not allowed. They would love to travel, but they're not allowed to travel. So it's the particular memorandum of understanding with the Indian government. So let's not blame UNHCR for that. But yes, otherwise, I mean, I'm sure they can treat people better.
Yeah, very quickly, I think a lot of this comes down to what experts call as burden sharing. because a large number of refugees continue to be hosted in border zones, or at least there is a great deal of perhaps the West not doing enough to share the concerns of refugees. So there is a lot of exceptional steps that are being taken by Western governments as well, with the UK-Rwanda deal, be it with the EU and Libya, or Italy and Libya. So there are several deals whereby there is a sense that refugees belong in the global South, and there should be a fortress that should be created in the West. So there is an adequate burden sharing on that front. And secondly, when it comes to governments in the global South, money alone is not going to resolve issues. It doesn't matter if you give, governments in the global South billions of dollars to ensure that refugees are protected, or at least they're adequately given the protections they require. But there also needs to be, much like what Rita was saying, a shift in the way we view refugees, that there needs to be a very clear-cut understanding of issues that come down to perhaps a change in legal framework, or the change in the way we do policy. So that is not there yet. So perhaps those are very existential solutions, but hopefully we'll get there.
As they say, inshallah, hopefully we'll get there. But thank you for this. We're going to open up to the audience now. So I think we've exceeded our time by 10 minutes, but if the speakers can stay on, we can extend it on the other side also by 5 to 10 minutes for whoever can. So if you in the audience have a question, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself, and maybe turn on your camera and ask your question and say for who you're asking the question. Ankita, can we unpin all the speakers so we can see a full gallery view for everybody?
Sure.
Okay, so we have a few questions already on the group, but does anybody want to start with their question, and then we can kind of move into the chats? Can't see everybody. Okay, Noje Mula has raised their hand. Do you want to ask your question? Okay, there are two participants who raised their hands. Pavan and Noje. Noje, do you want to start with your question? And can you tell us who was this question directed to? Maybe just introduce yourself in a sentence.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak out my question and to share my feelings as a refugee living in Bangladesh. So my name is Najmullah. I'm working for the girls in educational parts to improve their educations and to give them basic educations in the camps. So our CBO's name is Rohingya